So today I've been waiting for some parts to arrive, namely copper washers to go on these little bolts on the end. They arrived today, so I can finally reassemble the front shocks. This is how the order they go back together. This little cone piece fits on the end here, and then this whole lot slides down the tube. I have cleaned everything. I've cleaned everything with acetone. I've already inserted the oil seal in the end here and sort of pre-oiled that. Just noticed the little ring isn't clipped in. Here we go. There's the oil seal, a washer, and then the spring clip that holds it all in place. That's all in place now. So that all slides down. Oops, I've forgotten something. You need the actual fork tube first. So this is the fork tube. I didn't disassemble anything in the end there. There didn't seem to be any need. I was able to clean everything without fully taking it apart. So this piece slides down inside here like that, and you can just sort of see that it should appear at the end there. It's a bit tricky to do it with one hand, but that should slide down into there, and then I think I'm going to have to stop the camera and get that in place. Okay, I figured out what I was doing wrong here. This is the problem of trying to do things and film them at the same time. You lose track of what you're actually doing, which is why I don't normally do that, because I'd rather concentrate on actually assembling the things rather than filming the things. But the order is this piece goes in here, and then it slides down to the end, and this piece then fits in from this side. And this is basically what's locking it all together. So you can see that drops through, and then when this goes on here, this whole lot gets slid into the outer tube, and this is where the bolt goes, which is what's effectively holding this into this. So this bolt locks this to here, and then this is sliding up and down. But because of those pieces inside there, this limits how far this can't slide all the way off because of that valve on the end. So you assemble it like that, and then you slide all of this carefully. Sorry. Here we go. So then you can slide it all in there very carefully so you don't damage the oil seal, and then that Allen bolt should go in there, lock it all together. I am using Loctite on it. I'm pretty sure it recommends that in the manual, plus a new copper washer. So I'll do that bit next. So I now have that little Allen bolt in the end there, and this is where I need the special tool I made to slide down into here and find the end of that valve, which is machined to take that. And now that is how I can stop that moving when I do up the Allen bolt in the end here. So you can see those are connected, because if I turn the bolt here, it's turning that thing there, so I know that the screw thread is engaged. Again, I have to stop so I can actually do this rather than film this. So now with that all done up, it's just a matter of sliding all the rest of the bits inside here. So the 50 caliber shell goes in first, and then you've got the short spring, the spacer, and the long spring. Don't know why they do it like that. and it should, you can see this is bottomed out now, and it's because this is all the way in. Very tricky with one hand. So now that's at full extension. The springs and everything drop in there, and then there's just the end cap that goes on. I've pre-oiled the O-ring. I'll put all this together, and then I'll take it apart and actually fill up the shocks when it's on the bike, probably. There's just sort of a smear of oil inside there now to keep everything nicely lubricated, and so that I don't mess up the oil seals. Oh, again, I can't do this with one hand, it just won't turn. So I'll just do up that top bolt and see what it looks like. So those are the shocks reassembled. My paint repair on the rust, it looks pretty bad, but it feels pretty smooth, so I think that's actually going to work well. Hopefully it isn't going to just rust again. I'll probably make sure these are always well oiled. There's no damping oil in these at the moment, but these are vented, so the top cap actually has a small hole going all the way through. But that seems to be working. So they should be good to go back on the bike when it's time to reassemble things. Let's see, what else? Job for this weekend is stripping the paint off this and repainting it. And I also ordered and received a whole bunch of other parts. So we've got rim bands. I should have all the different wheel bearings here. And these are all just, so I don't know much about these obviously, but this White's seems to be a motorcycle, like a aftermarket parts supplier. I think they're Australian based. They seem to sell a lot of bits and pieces, so I've just gone with their stuff. Everything should be fine because it's not a performance bike that I'm going to use in competition or anything like that. It's just muck around in the garden at home. So I just went with the easy and cheap to get bearings, but that's what they are. I also figured out these things, which are called, are they bead locks, rim locks, something like that. You might remember somewhere over here. These are the ones that came out of the tires, and yes, they are meant to be bonded together, so these are good. It turns out these are cheap, they're not expensive, so I just bought a new set of those. There's one on the front tire and two on the rear, so when I reassemble everything I'll use those. I can't remember what else is in there. It's mainly those and bearings. The rims I'm still cleaning up. They were a lot worse, and I've been trying to think of the best way to get the rust off the spokes. I was looking at electrolytically doing it, but I'm not sure how that would affect the aluminium. I don't think it's great for it. I think it's because the solution you use is slightly alkaline, and it could react with the aluminium. So the inside, the aluminium, I've just cleaned up basically by hand. Little metal brushes, steel wool, lots of degreaser and cleaner and alloy wheel cleaner and things like that, and they've actually come up pretty good. I mean, good enough for a beta bike. I also noticed that these have all been helicoiled. This is where the main sprocket goes. There's helicoils in all of those. But the rim itself, it was actually quite hard getting to that inside bit, and I still need to do a little bit more, just a little bit more cleaning to get all the oxidization and stuff off. The inside of the rims were filthy. There was dirt all through the inside of there, so that wasn't nice. I bought a set of spoke spanners just so I can make sure these are all nice and tight, and I think what I'm going to do is just with a wire brush on a drill or steel wool or wet and dry, I'm just going to manually clean all of the spokes and get the rust off them. And then I was looking at what I can recoat everything with, because otherwise it'll just rust again. And one of the solutions I saw online was Rust-Oleum do an appliance paint. They do a stainless steel appliance paint, which is apparently a very, very hard wearing, very tough, but I think reasonably thin epoxy coating. But it turns out you can't get that in New Zealand. You can get white, but you can't get the silver stainless steel kind. And of course you can't get it sent from overseas. So I think I'll just have to paint everything with something. Otherwise it's all just going to rust again. So I'm still trying to figure out what the best thing to do is there. I know people do have wheels powder coated, spoked wheels, but I don't like that. Because if the powder coating breaks or cracks, it can rust underneath the powder coat. So I'd rather have a nice thin coat of paint on them and just keep them well oiled or well cleaned up to make sure they don't rust again. Either that or clear coat it all or something along those lines. I just kind of want it clean and tidy. It's getting there. Like you can see, I've really cleaned these up, but there is still more to do, and I don't want to take them all apart and then have to relace them. So it's just tricky trying to get, you just go in multiple times in there cleaning it with Scotch-Brites and steel wool or whatever you have. So I'm pretty sure I should be able to get those relatively clean and nice. The rims are a bit beaten up on the edges, of course. Again, I just want it tidy. What else? I did buy new rear shocks for them. Again, these are just budget shocks. You can get proper trials ones from the UK for, it's not hugely expensive, not compared to doing a Riley. But these were cheap, again from Australia. They should just bolt straight on. They do seem thicker, the springs. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's just because they're shinier. But if you compare, or if I compare, how much force it takes to compress these, it's way more than those ones. And of course, I don't know what I'm comparing against. So I don't know if that's because these are new and it's just the fact that they're new that they're quite stiff. Are these ones old and worn out? I think that's what the case is, because if you do compress these, it's pretty easy. I can push down on them. And if you do it, they do make some odd noises. As far as I can tell, these aren't really repairable. There is a pin through there. Maybe you can knock that pin out. You can get these apart. The bump stop's fallen off that one. But then it looks like the rest of it is all kind of sealed. So I'm pretty sure you can't dismantle these and clean them up. So obviously I'll keep them. They're the original ones off the bike, so they'll stay with the bike. But to actually get it usable, I'll just bolt those on. They're the correct length and they've got the correct bushings. The frame, I was going to show the frame, but I've forgotten that's back out in the back of the Land Rover, being cooked some more. So I think that's where we're at on the bike. It's coming up to a long weekend here. I want to do some work on the Riley, but I'll also continue on with stripping down bike parts, cleaning them up, painting them. This is the main sprocket. It's got 52 stamped on it, and I think this is perfectly usable. I'm sure it's worn a little bit, but compared to the aluminium new one I've got, it doesn't look that bad. So I'd rather reuse the original. So that'll go back on there. I have got a new chain for it though. And this is the air filter. The foam goes around that. So the rest of the air filter is in the back of the Landy cooking. There's just all sorts of little bits and pieces to start cleaning up. So covers, brakes, I've got brake shoes, should be on the way. They're pretty pretty standard sort of things. Again, I don't know how worn these are. There is actually a little indicator on the shoes. There's a little pointer that shows you. So when the new ones arrive, I'll be able to compare what the thickness of the linings looks like. But they were cheap, so it was worth getting those. The covers will need cleaning up. Things like the controls, all those different bits and pieces. I need a bigger box to put all these parts in. So yeah, it's just a matter of slowly cleaning it up, tidying up bits and pieces, painting them. That was an awful sounding car. This is the kickstand, for example. This has had all the rust taken off it. I left it soaking in the Evaporust overnight. Might need to clean that bit there. So this needs painting. Just all sorts of little bits and pieces. This is a wheel spacer, sprocket bolts, another wheel spacer. And then there's the, should probably put the lid on my acetone. I should see if, so with the Riley, I don't know if people remember, but I was missing a gasket for one of these water housing fittings. There's a little sort of fiber washer thing under there, and there's a local company that makes that kind of thing, and they mentioned to me that they've got laser cutters or CNC machines, and they can actually cut stuff like this out for me. I haven't tried that yet. So what I think I'll do is I'll CAD these up, get a little CAD file to them, a little DXF or whatever it is, and go and talk to them and say, hey, are you able to cut some of these out of thin sheet metal for me? And I think they might be able to do that, which would be convenient because you can make these things by hand. They're just lock washers. They're not super critical, but it's just much easier if I can get them machine cut. And I actually got some other bits and pieces to fix a weed eater, which is why that's on the floor there. But when I ordered the parts from that shop, I got some extra fuel line just to replace the sort of fuel lines and hoses and overflow pipes and things that are on the carburetor. So you can see there's one there, that's just vinyl or PVC type pipe. There's another one here on the back of the crankcase. That one might be reusable. So I can just replace all of those things and just assemble a nice, clean, usable bike. Now that I've assembled these, I realized I had them marked the wrong way round. I had my left side and my right side ones swapped. It doesn't matter because I had it consistently swapped, but this one is the left-hand fork. It's got this extra boss on it, which is to do with the brakes, basically. Because it's a drum brake, you need somewhere to attach the outside of the drum, or the inside in this case, the bit with the shoes, and that all effectively gets bolted onto that. So I was very careful not to mess up the pieces, even though I had what was on the left on the right and the right on the left. But these look good now. You can hear the springs inside them without any oil in there, but they seem to work evenly, which is good. And where the seal is nice and smooth. So most of the rust was actually outside the area that the seal rubs on anyway. So I think we should be good there. I may fit rubber gaiters to these. I'm not sure. I could fit them here to hide this, but there's no point because it doesn't make sense to have a flexible gaiter in the unmoving part. But I think that's okay. It's really hard to match that shiny silver color. That's almost impossible. So those look good. I am playing around with new video editing software, so I don't know how well it's going to go, me putting all these little clips together. I was using the old Windows Movie Maker, which is ancient now, but it's always done everything I need it to do. But I've switched to a different sort of editing software. Not that I'm intending to put any more effort into actually filming and editing things, but thought it was just time to upgrade. And I'm still playing around with whether or not it's worth putting ads in the videos. YouTube does anyway. I don't know if not monetizing it affects how well your channel does. That doesn't really worry me that much. And also I didn't make any money from it anyway. I don't have enough viewers. It doesn't make any difference. I think each film I put up would make me maybe $1 or $2. And I think it's just not worth the hassle and not worth inflicting ads on people for that sort of payback. And I'm not trying to make money from this, so I'll see. I don't know if turning them off has actually made any difference to how many ads get shown or not, so that'd be interesting to know. I don't tend to watch my own films on YouTube after I've edited them, because I've already watched them 27 times to edit the stupid things. So that's where we're at. Just doing a little more on the bike at the moment, waiting to see if the weather improves today so I can get the Riley timber frame outside to do some more sanding on that. We've got a long weekend this weekend, so I've got an extra day to play with, which is good. I've been tidying up a little bit as well and trying to get a bit more organized and get parts on shelves and off the floor and into boxes and things. The rims still need a bit more cleaning, and then I have to figure out what I'm going to paint them with. Similarly, the rear bumper, it's pretty grubby. It's been cleaned multiple times. Everything gets cleaned multiple times. It seems to take 3 or 4 goes at cleaning everything to get all the grime off, because it's a real combination of mud and oil and chain oil and that kind of stuff. It gets flicked everywhere. So multiple times at cleaning it, water blasting it, getting it all nice. What I'm thinking is recoat those with, I can't remember what the stuff's called. It's kind of an underbody sealer, and it comes out with a textured finish, and that's what I used on the front and rear valances on the MGB. So it's designed as a stone chip type stuff basically, and it comes out with a kind of lumpy finish. I think that might work on these guards, just to clean them up and make them a uniform color. I have to see if you can still get that stuff actually. Let's see what else. The kickstand is, the paint's drying there, that needs another couple of coats. These came up really well. That's the air filter, the sponge holder for the air filter cleaner. Got my tires there. And at the moment I'm cleaning up this is the chain guard, and that is part of the mud guard. It's the metal piece that goes underneath the plastic mud guard, so it's sort of behind the engine, between the engine and the rear wheel. And that was grimy and rusty and was painted, and I've stripped most of the paint off. I've just put it through, I've just degreased it all, cleaned it off. I've been using this stuff as degreaser, which seems to work pretty well, and super cheap. Had it on clearance special for $8, which means they won't have any more, but other places have it. And then the chain guard, again, this was covered in grime. It's pretty thin metal, and it's been a bit beaten up, so you can see where there's kind of a hole there, and this has all been torn and mangled. And I was considering, oh, there's still grime on it. I was considering trying to weld all of this up and make it nice, and I've decided not to do that because the metal's so thin I'll just end up burning through it. So I'm just going to straighten it out as best I can, clean all the rust off it and repaint it. As long as these bits are out of the way, it should be fine. And it's still original then as well. Yeah, so there's more dirt in there. I just need to go and give this another clean off under the hose pipe with wire brushes, and then I'm going to put them in Evaporust, get all the actual rust off them. This one ends up being painted that same gloss black, and this one was obviously a sort of silver color, so I'll use my silver galv colored paint, which is anti-rust paint as well, so that'll help keep that all nice. And the front forks are done. I should put those on the shelves. I'm still waiting for these caps. So they're coming from a place in the UK who've just started remaking them. Now, they've been sent, but there was no tracking number or anything, so I've no idea where those are actually at the moment. Maybe I should email them and see if there's any sort of tracking. I'm pretty sure as soon as I email them, they'll arrive. So I probably should do that then. But they seem good. There's no oil in them yet. I'll wait until it's on the bike to fill them up with oil so I can get the correct level. They give you there is actually a milliliter amount in the manual, but they also say, when it's on the bike, you take the top caps off and the oil should be up to a certain level. So I'll do it that way once the bike's reassembled. I was also waiting for a couple of oil seals for the axles, so they're on the way as well. So I'll go give these yet another cleanup and then put them in the Evaporust and let it do its job. I keep forgetting to show what things look like before I start cleaning them up, so I thought I'd do that for the engine. Just got it sitting in this tub. I'm going to spray it with degreaser and just slowly go around it with little brushes and things and just try and clean all the muck off it. I've got the ports all blocked off. After I've done it, of course, I'm going to drain everything out of it. I'll take the spark plugs out. I'll make sure it's not got any liquids in it. Once it's all clean, and then I'll fill it back up with new oils and fluids and whatever else it needs. I may take the clutch cover off and have a look and see what the state of the clutch is, but the rest of the engine I'm not really going to go too deep into it because it seems to have good compression and it didn't seem to be leaking oil much, so I think it should be fine if it's just cleaned up. Spent most of the afternoon giving the engine a good clean, and I went through the box of parts and dug out the extra covers and bits and pieces and cleaned them up as well. Trying to clean all these fins is just a pain in the neck, and there was a lot of I guess verdigris you'd call it, sort of corrosion on the fins. There was a lot of dirt and grime and muck, so I used a lot of degreaser on it, and in the end actually water blasted it as well, and that still didn't really get everything out, so I ended up using a little wire brush on a Dremel and trying to get into all the different places. I haven't bothered to polish it too much. I've just wanted to get the dirt off and get it reasonably clean, and it's come up okay. So the way you would do this if you were doing a full concourse type restoration would be you'd strip the whole engine and you'd get these vapor blasted, and they would come up immaculately clean. I've always found vapor blasting actually makes things look a little bit too clean. They almost look like they're painted with sort of silver paint. So for this bike I just want clean and tidy, and it's come up pretty good, so that's not too bad. And I fitted this is the replacement cover I got because the one that came on the bike is actually cracked down here. It's been dinged up. It's obviously hit a rock or something. It's interesting that the cylinder head has 2 plug holes. I haven't taken that out. I'm assuming it's the same as the spark plug hole. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. I also cleaned up the brake shoes. These are the ones that came with the bike, and I think they're probably original because these are made in Japan. I don't know what the thickness of these should be. I've got new ones coming. I think they're made in China, but it'll be interesting just to compare how thick the linings are on those. I think these are still usable. The actual linings themselves seem okay. I don't think there's any problem there. They cleaned up pretty well, so they might be reusable. The sprocket, that may need to be changed because that's looking a bit worn. a bit asymmetric. It might be the way to put it. And you can feel the wear on the teeth actually. I've just noticed that now. You can feel sort of in there, there's a sort of a groove, because if you think that's spinning that way, I can feel where the chain's grabbed inside there, so that probably does need replacing. And I haven't quite figured out how you get this off. This is the control for the oiler. So the throttle cable joins links to two things. It goes to the carburetor and to this. So when you open the throttle, it changes the speed or the flow rate of the automatic oiler, and that's what's sending oil up here, and it dumps it straight into the intake. And that's how that automatic oiling on these works. A lot of people seem to disconnect that for some reason, but on mine it works. I actually checked it and checked the flow rates as it says to in the manual, and it was all fine, so I'll just keep using it. And I also discovered the engine number there. What's it there? So I don't know if that helps me with anything, but it was interesting to find it. It was just so covered in grime on here you couldn't even see it. These are the different bits of the brakes. These have all been cleaned and degreased and then put through the ultrasonic. And I'm also cleaning up the this is the speedo housing. And over here, this is the actual speedo itself. The rubber grommet around the outside was completely shot. It just basically fell apart. This is sort of the remains of it here. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. I'll have to figure something out on how I can replace that with something suitable, but that's what mounts that into that little bracket. There's some little bolts and bits and pieces that hold it. And then this is the speedo cable inner. That all seems good. Put that down there. And this is the outer. The ends were starting to rust, so I put it in the Evaporust, got all the rust off it, and I've just touched it up with some silver paint. That's that really high zinc sort of anti-rust paint, so that should be good. It's a little bit too silver for my liking, but I think it'll dull down a little bit. So that's the same paint I used on this kind of thing, but that's all inside the air filter, so you don't see that. And the under here, to hopefully slow down the evaporation, here's the cover, the chain cover, and you can see how the Evaporust just takes all the rust off it. Only my container isn't quite big enough. There's some rust there, and then every so often I'll take things out and sort of scrape it a bit to make sure all of the loose rust is removed, or anything flaky comes off, and then put it back in there. And this is the under the mudguard housing, you can still see some rust there, but the outside of it has just come up really clean. So I'm going to leave that soaking in there overnight. You can tell when the Evaporust is exhausted, it basically turns black. It just gets darker and darker as it gets more and more used up, and you can see it's getting pretty grim looking now. I think it's got a little bit of life left in it, but after a while it just stops working basically, so you have to get more. So I'm going to leave those overnight, and then probably in the morning flip them over and do a bit more rust killing there. And I think that's it on the bike. My parts for the Riley hinges and bits and pieces are on the way. I believe they're in Auckland now, so hopefully I'll get them during the next week. And the weather was kind of weird today, so I couldn't take the body out to sand it. It did spit a couple of times, but it didn't really rain, but it was overcast the whole day, but it was still enough for me to get quite sunburnt, which is one of the hazards in New Zealand. So I think this is clean enough. Like I say, it's not a full-on restoration. If I was ever stripping the engine down, then I would look at getting everything all the aluminium casings and things blasted, to clean them up and then rebuild them. One thing I've been trying to figure out is, on these bikes, was this background around the lettering, was that coloured in black? Was that painted black? I've got a feeling it was, to make this stand out a bit more. It's kind of textured behind there. If it was, it'd be quite nice to do that, just to bring it back a little bit. But no, it's come up well. There were years and years of dirt and grime on it, especially all around here, because obviously the chain is covered in oil, and the oil attracts dirt, and it all just sticks and turns into a horrible mess. But it's good. I'm trying to figure out what I need to do next on this. The wheels, I really wish I had a big enough container and enough Evaporust just to soak these in the Evaporust. But I've been wire brushing the spokes and getting most of the loose rust off. The rims I've cleaned by hand. I mean the hubs rather. They still need a bit more cleaning. I've kind of got to the point now where I can use carb cleaner or something like that, brake clean, just to get the last little bits of dirt out of it. And what I'm wondering is, can I set these up in a container and use a spray bottle full of Evaporust and just keep spraying them, and just leave it sitting there all day while I'm doing other things, and just every time I go past, give it another spray so it stays wet on the spokes, if that'll be enough to actually eat the rust off there. I think that might work. So, and then the idea is the spray drips down into the container and I can collect it again later to reuse. So I may give that a try. I might need to get another bottle of Evaporust actually. It's really good stuff. I've tried all sorts of different ways of getting rust off things. This is definitely one of the easiest and one of the safest. It's not acidic, it's not alkaline, it's not poisonous. Probably shouldn't drink it, but it doesn't hurt your skin, it doesn't hurt anything but rust, so you can put those aluminium parts in it, it's fine. Rubber parts, like the Speedo cable has a rubber coating on the outside, it was fine in that. It's all just easy enough just to submerge things in it. So it's not cheap, but in terms of time, where you can just sort of set up a container like this and leave it soaking, and it just takes the rust off things easily and cleanly, it's pretty good. So yes, maybe tomorrow I'll go out and get some more. A little more on the bike today. My idea of spraying the wheels with the Evaporust during the day seems to be working okay. The rear wheels come up really well. The front wheel still has quite a bit of rust on it, but it's just a matter of sort of rubbing it off, scrubbing it a bit, spraying a little bit more on, leave it, and just continually doing that, and eventually the rust will go away, I think. I ended up buying some paint. I can't remember if I ranted about this before, but I know I've definitely mentioned about getting materials and things in New Zealand, and I'm sure it's getting more difficult these days. It's always been difficult because New Zealand's an island, so everything has to be imported. But just little things. I mentioned about the underbody seal stuff that I was going to use to clean up the mudguards. So this is the rear guard. It's pretty grotty. So what I wanted was a nice coat of something flexible, the right color, just to clean them up. And what I wanted to use was Body Schultz. It's like an underbody spray that it goes over anything. You can paint over the top of it. It's nice, rubbery and flexible. So 10 years or so ago, when I did my MGB, you used to be able to get it in different colors. And I remember what I used was white. I actually used it from one of the bigger cans with the applicator gun. I've got one of those. But it turns out now you can't get the white color. They just don't bring it into the country. And the only one you can really get is black. And this happened to be a sort of end-of-line gray color, which I ended up grabbing. And as you can see, it is light gray. And you can see it sort of covers really well. It'll be a nice flexible coating. And then I can top coat it with sort of gloss white, which is what the mudguards were. But the the chap in the shop said, yeah, they didn't sell much of it, so they just don't bother bringing it in. And it means you just can't get it here. Another example is I've been looking at painting the wheels. I know a lot of people get them powder coated. I don't like the idea of powder coating spoked wheels, just because it can crack around the spokes, or if you have to adjust the spokes, you're going to break the powder coat anyway. I know paint's the same, but with the powder coat, if anything gets underneath it, it can rust underneath it and you can't see it. I think the powder coats these days are a lot better, but I know definitely the guy who rebuilt my wheels for my Riley, who also builds spoked wheels for things like World War I aircraft, said he doesn't powder coat them. He said, no, don't do that. It'll rust underneath the powder coat. So he always paints them. So I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about, because he builds them for people like Peter Jackson and people with vintage aircraft and things. So I want to paint the wheels. And again, it comes down to trying to decide what you're going to use, and everyone's got a different opinion. But looking online, you kind of get some idea. You weigh up all the evidence and what's good and what isn't, and what'll work and what won't. One thing that apparently works quite well is Rust-Oleum do an appliance paint. So it's specifically designed for painting on fridges and things like that, but it's a very hard wearing enamel, very tough. And apparently people have had good luck painting wheels with it. And they do a stainless steel version of that paint. But again, you cannot get it in New Zealand. Just can't buy it. Doesn't even show up on their local website. If you looked at the Rust-Oleum Australian website or the US website, it's definitely a product they do, and you can definitely get it. But in New Zealand, no, you can only get the white. So I can't use that. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to use. I may end up using the Duplicolor engine enamel, which I tend to use on most other things, the black usually. But I've got silver. They do a silver, and this is the first time I've tried using the silver, and I have found that it runs a bit more easily than the black. The black's pretty forgiving, and being an engine enamel, it actually sticks really well to anything. I mean, you still prep the surface as well as you can, but it just sticks really well. It's pretty tough once it dries. It's just a nice, hard, and not too thick finish. So that's what I've used on all the suspension gear on the Riley. This is actually all just engine enamel, that Duplicolor. If it gets chipped anywhere, you can just touch it up from the spray can. I like it. It's good stuff, and I'm seriously considering using that as the top coat on the chassis as well, because I want that all black. Well, I don't want gloss black. I want sort of this satin finish black, and then I can always touch it up again as I need to. That's separate to, you can see the difference in the paint here. The torque tube's done in the engine enamel, and these bands that hold the cables are done in the black rust-proof paint, which is what I've used on the other bits of the bike, because it's gloss, it's anti-rust, doesn't need a primer, and that's what, for example, that's what this cover here is. It takes ages to dry, and it does help if you can bake it on. So I've still got things sitting in the back of the Landy baking, which is working really well. So I may end up painting the wheels with this silver, which is pretty much the color they were. Again, if you were doing this all properly and it was a full-on restoration, you would strip everything down. You would probably get stainless steel spokes. Chances are you'd probably even get new rims, but it's not a concourse restoration, it's just me throwing it together. The engine's come up really well. I bought new fluids for it today, so I'll have to drain all the old fluids and things out of it. I've cleaned up the brake back plates. The brake shoes, I think I mentioned, they still look okay. They don't seem contaminated with oil or anything like that. They're quite clean. Put back on these little clips. I just put these through the ultrasonic, got any rust off them with the Evaporust, then used the ultrasonic, and then just clear coated them just so they don't rust again. And think that's it. Like I say, I'm going to do the outside of this. I'll probably do another coat on the inside and then coat the outside, and eventually that'll just be overcoated with white, and that should clean those up pretty well. And I think there's a few other little bits and pieces, but yeah, it's just tricky. If anyone knows what better paint would be to use on the rims, you know, feel free to suggest them. Somebody on one of the forums I posted on said, oh, you're better off going to an auto body store and they'll recommend something. But one, I don't know that there are any conveniently close to me that I can just pop in and see them. And two, what I've found in the past is they don't necessarily know any better than the car parts stores where you're buying the rattle cans. Some of them do, some of them are good, but chances are they're just going to sell you whatever they've actually got in stock to sell you. You know, so it's hard to know. If I end up painting it and at 10 years time it all needs redoing again, that's fine. It's another project. So I think it'll be fine from the sort of use and what I'm going to be doing with it. And yeah, I think that's it.